Now, the right time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio.
And ESPNradio.com.
Last night, the Spurs won the Summer League. If you didn't know that the Summer League came with a title, I'm right there with you. I just thought the Summer League was really just kind of like a round robin, right? Everybody just came and played and hung out, got in shape, sell some tickets, lemonade and stuff, Frito pies at the concession stand. But apparently they give away a trophy at the end now, and the Spurs, because they win stuff, the Spurs won the Summer League title. And Becky Hammon, Becky as in, short for Rebecca, she was the coach of the Spurs Summer League team, and she is an assistant for the Spurs, has been an assistant for the Spurs, at least she was last season. And they're raising people to ask the question as to whether or not they could see a scenario under which she would be an NBA head coach. And you had a lot of people jump up on Twitter. Jay Billis said that, she should have a job in the next couple of years. Bobby Marks, who used to work as an executive with the Nets, but quickly figured out his quickest path to credibility would be to create himself a Twitter account, right? Like, that's a great way to do it. That's the next best thing to, becoming a color commentator. Like, you get the job as a color commentator for the national broadcast, people try to give you a head coaching job, right? This is the best way for him to get back. Get out here on the Twitter, right? He said that somebody should offer her a job. Now, I think that this is an interesting question on a number of levels. The first thing that you have to get out of the way when you start having a discussion about whether or not a woman could be a head coach in the NBA is the issue at play is not whether or not she's a good enough coach. That isn't it. And you know why that's not the issue at play? Because they out here hiring anybody. And I'm not even necessarily blaming teams for being out here hiring anybody because the Warriors just hired anybody and paid anybody $5 million a year, and they just want a ring. Like, we've seen this happen a few times. Pat Riley was an assistant for a little bit, but he was the broadcaster not long before he got the job with the Lakers. That's one example. Doc Rivers was working as a broadcaster and had never been a coach before he got that job. We can go up and down. There are a lot of guys like this. Like, if we've learned anything at this point, there's no real template for who can and cannot be an NBA coach. It's just a matter of whether or not somebody's willing to hire you. And the question then becomes whether men would be willing to hire a woman to coach men. What would that take? Well, the answer to that is actually pretty simple. It would take a man with enough power to push that sort of thing through. Like, I feel pretty confident saying this. If you got a room with 5 men and you need to convince 3 of them that insert woman here is a qualified head coach. I don't care if it's Becky Hammon. I don't care if it's Pat Summitt. I don't care if it's your Aunt Ruth, right? You got to convince 3 of those 5 men that this woman is qualified for the job when a man is available to hire. How likely do you think it is? Not even knowing who the woman is, just knowing that you're dealing with a room full of men. How likely do you think it is? If you're one of those people that's thinking right now you can't hire a woman to do that, well, you're one of the reasons why it'd be damn near impossible to get up to 3. And I'm just talking about men that you pulling off the street. I ain't even necessarily talking about men that have been steeped in this athletic culture. But we struggle generally with the notion of women being in charge. Like, I think when people talk about this and we talk about whether or not somebody would be allowed to do a job like this in athletics, we put it, like, in the context of this hypermasculinity of athletics, right? Because that's real easy for us to do in these sorts of discussions. I felt like it was the same thing with Michael Sam, for example, right? Where we talk about, boy, you know how terrible that locker room is. Yeah, because everybody else treats gay people so well. Got it. People do that in things involving gay people with race very, very often. The notion of, like, the homophobic black person, for example. Oh, yeah, because white people treat gay folks so well, right? Like, it's real easy to point the finger when you put it off on somebody else. So the Becky Hammon discussion becomes interesting because before you even get to a point where you are discussing, like, a woman in basketball, you're just talking about a woman in power. And men struggle with that. And I feel like every man listening to this who works in a situation with women in power, You know how men talk about that woman when she is not around. You know how that goes. That's the holdup. Like all that stuff about being in a locker room and people being crude in locker rooms and they get naked back there and everything else. I mean, I think by this point, like if she's been an assistant coach on a basketball team, on an NBA basketball team, I feel like she'll be okay with that part. Just a hunch. Generally speaking, I have come to find in our lives that women are not nearly as impressed and or uncomfortable with the prospect of naked men as we would like to believe. It's just not really how it works. And cussing men and filthy men and everything else, that isn't anything new. The holdup in situations like that is men that have the heart to see somebody think that that is the best candidate and then actually push it through despite the protestations of his friends. That's what the holdup tends to be on anything that's bold. You got to be the one that's willing to stick it out when it goes wrong. Like somebody's got to be the Branch Rickey if you're going to be in a situation like that. But when we pose these questions, we always pose it as like, okay, well, Becky Hammon is good enough to be an NBA coach. Okay, entirely possible. There are a lot of people that are good enough to be NBA coaches that aren't NBA coaches for a range of reasons. So who would be the person that would have the heart to put such a thing through? Well, the obvious answer there, of course, would be the Spurs. Greg Popovich retires, maybe that's the move that they would want to make. Who knows? I don't even know if that's necessarily the move that they should make. You know why I don't know? Because I don't know a damn thing about who is or is not or should not be a coach. That is why. As I have stated before on this topic, you look at the random folks that get called up to be NBA head coaches, we have no idea what the formula is on who's supposed to be an NBA coach. None. None whatsoever. That's terrible for a situation like that. Like if you're trying to break down a barrier, you get yourself in a situation where people come up with any old excuse to pick somebody else. They're going to give you any old excuse to pick somebody else. They're going to tell you something that doesn't even make any sense. I just got this feeling. It's just in my gut or something like that. Like that's how these things tend to go. That's how these things tend to operate. So I bring this up just because I feel like there are a lot of people, when you wind up having this discussion, who miss a very, very important point. Like with Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson making the big leagues wasn't a big deal because there was a black person that was finally good enough to play in the big leagues. I mean, we knew that existed. Jackie Robinson making the big leagues was a big deal because somebody finally decided to be decent enough to do the right thing. Jackie Robinson gets the credit because he had to endure everything that came from it. But the actual act of him making a roster, well, that's on the person who's responsible for the roster. It's the same sort of situation with something like this. But I do think that if you had a situation with an NBA team, it would be a fascinating experiment to see if a woman could coach an NBA team. Now, Stephanie Reddy, who works on the Hornets media coverage, the TV team for them, she coached a D-League team, I believe. And, I mean, it happened. Like, I don't recall any major incident or anything else. The world didn't stop spinning or anything like that. Like, it went on, right? The question I would have is, and NBA teams, a coach can lose an NBA team unlike losing any other team, and it can happen right away. All it takes is one thing, and you can lose an NBA team. The one thing I would say on the players' end, because I think the NBA players can deal with basically anybody who shows who they can respect, and I think that women can be respected by NBA players. But man, if you lose them early, I can't imagine what it's like to try to get them back. Like, that's generally speaking. That's before we start talking about women in a patriarchy. Anyway, thought that was interesting.
Bomani.
Man, in these slow times, I'm so thankful for Instagram beef. You guys may have noticed yesterday there was Instagram beef with Shaquille O'Neal and Scottie Pippen. Shaq started by saying that a team full of Laker greats would beat a team full of Bulls greats by 50 points. Scottie said, I don't know about hypotheticals. I just know about these rings. Shaq didn't take that so well. He called Scotty a sidekick. He sent out a picture of Scotty's face on a sidekick, which you may remember was a telecommunications device from the middle portion of the previous decade. That was a precursor to the smartphone. He put Scottie Pippen's face in that. Scottie Pippen hit him back with more pictures showing all the times that he said that Shaq was a sidekick. Shaq then called Scottie Pippen a woman. And then today, Scottie Pippen put a picture on Instagram with all 6 of his rings. And then Shaq replied with a picture of a fiddle with Scottie Pippen's face on it because he said that Scottie Pippen was the second fiddle. Scottie Pippen turns 50 in September. Shaq is 43 right now. Just want to remind you guys that that's what's going on. But, hey. No need to get too far down the line on the immature beef. I told you, by the way, that it would be a matter of time before Shaq hit him with a cheap shot, and the cheap shot, of course, was insulting Scottie Pippen by calling him a woman. But this all took me to Scottie Pippen's Instagram page, because I got to be honest with you. I ain't really been curious about anything going on with Scottie Pippen in quite a while. Like, honestly, my curiosity in Scottie Pippen kind of went away right around 1998. Like, I know that's not when he finally left the league, but that's kind of where I stopped, like, actually caring about things that involve Scottie Pippen. I got to be honest. Like I say, Scottie Pippen is in a real unfortunate situation because Scottie Pippen is a Hall of Fame basketball player that nobody wants to be. Nobody wants to be Scottie Pippen. Like, there's some people that might want to be Kevin McHale. You got all the post moves. Nobody wants to be Scottie Pippen, right? I mean, that's got to be whack. So Scotty's in this interesting place, I'd say, in 2015, and here's what I mean. Michael Jordan is above all the Bulls' nostalgia. Like, he's Michael Jordan. Right? The Bulls want to attach themselves to Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan ain't really got to do the same thing back. Plus, Michael Jordan owns his own basketball team. So the Bulls have this glory era of basketball, and they kind of have a void for somebody to be the face of it because, it ended kind of bad with the Bulls for Michael Jordan. Now Michael Jordan is with owns the Hornets. So somebody's got to go get all that money for being Mr. Nostalgia for that era. And there's Scottie Pippen right there, like, I could use some money. So there's Scottie Pippen, right? Scottie Pippen gets that dough. Scottie Pippen gets that bread. And he gets that bread because somebody's got to get that bread, all right? So Scottie Pippen has been more visible in the last few years than, I could ever think of. Because Scottie Pippen, somebody has to be that guy. Why not be Scottie Pippen? So there's Scottie Pippen. So I went to Scottie Pippen's Instagram page. And let me tell you something. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if there was Instagram in 1994? Or what it would be like if it was Instagram in 1991? Or what it would be like if there was Instagram in 1998? Because if you've ever wondered what it would be like if there was Instagram in 1991 or 1994 or 1998, you could find out exactly what that would be like. Just go to Scottie Pippen's Instagram page. Yo, man, like Scottie Pippen gives you, a few pictures now of him hanging out with people and stuff like that. But you would think that Scottie Pippen played his entire career with the Bulls looking on Instagram. Scottie got more pictures on Instagram with Michael Jordan than it appears that he has with his wife. And all these pictures are from the 1990s. Every single one of them. They are all from the 1990s. You would have no idea that Scottie Pippen had ever been to Portland, that Scottie Pippen ever laid eyes on Houston. No. Scottie Pippen has no memories from any of those stops. All Scottie Pippen's got is pictures with rich people, pictures with famous people, and pictures from the 1990s. That's his whole thing. Oh, my bad. Here's a picture from the 1980s of when he switched hats with my man Olton Polynice. Here's a picture of Scottie Pippen with Ron Harper. Who else we got here? Yeah. Like, that's what it is. Scottie Pippen, like, I feel like if you go to Scottie Pippen's house right now, you're going to hear some Illmatic. You're going to hear some Reasonable Doubt. You're going to hear some SWV. You might even hear some Nirvana. Who knows? Black Hole Sun might be his jam. He might like some Soundgarden, right? But you ain't going to hear nothing that came out after 1998 No, sirree, Bob. You go ask Scottie Pippen, like, yo, Scottie Pippen, what's your favorite Jay-Z album? Man, mine's The Blueprint. He's like, The Blueprint? I've never heard of that. Yeah, The Blueprint, man. It came out in 2001. No. I don't listen to nothing that came out after 98. Like, none of that at all. I'm surprised that Scottie Pippen ain't out here right now wearing way too baggy jeans and Timberland boots based on his Instagram page. He is not leaving that time period. And you know why? That's where all his money is at. Right there. 1997. That's where Scotty's bread is. Right there. Just he gonna lay in that sweet spot, and he is not about to go anywhere else. Like, I bet Horace Grant look at Scotty mad, like, man, if I would have stayed, I could have been getting some of this Scotty money. And then Horace Grant's Instagram page would look like 1997. That's an interesting thing, though. I worry about those guys, like where you're stuck in a time period. Like, you guys see that picture of Slick Rick that hit the internet the other day? Like, everybody been out here dragging Slick Rick. And I just think you're some disrespectful little jokers for out here dragging one of the greatest MCs of all time. And look, I understand why you're doing it. Slick Rick was out there wearing some fake Louis Vuitton, and he had on the pink eye patch, and it was pink accents on the shirt and everything else. But Slick Rick is unfortunately trapped in a moment in time, right? Because Slick Rick put out The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. That came out in 1988, all right? One of the greatest records of all time. And not too long after that, Slick Rick went to jail. And Slick Rick wound up in jail a little bit too long. He should have never gone like that. But by the time Slick Rick got out, his whole era had passed, and he'd gotten out. And right when he got out, there was still, like, Slick Rick nostalgia. But he never had time to, like, evolve past the Slick Rick stage of the eye patch and the jewelry and everything else. So Slick Rick has always got to wear the eye patch, and he's always, well, he has to wear the eye patch for other reasons, but he's always got to wear all the jewelry. Like, he's always got to do all those things because he's trapped in that moment. Like, the way things broke for him, he can never get out of that moment. Scottie Pippen is like, I'm not trapped in the 90s. I'm just never going to leave. I'm right here. It's going to be a matter of time before you break out a vest that looked like it's made out of kente cloth. Hey, man, the 90s were good to some people. You know what I'm saying? The economy was rolling. Yeah, man. We had a president who could play saxophone. That's what Scotty's talking about. Arkansas was on top in the 90s, bruh. Arkansas was running things. Me and Bill holding it down for Arkansas. That appears to be what it is. But really, go check. Hey, here's Scotty with Horace Grant with Bob Costas doing an interview in a double-breasted jacket. Yes, from the 1990s.
Bomani.
Indulge me for just a second, ladies and gentlemen, as we are in that time of the sporting calendar where there's not that much to talk about, and I'll get to what I had planned to talk about this segment, next segment, but I just want to do this right now. I went on vacation last week. I don't feel very rested upon returning from my vacation last week. It is a very long story as to why I do not feel rested. That being said, I would like you guys to commiserate with me on something that I think that we can all, like, share in, a problem that we all have. And you know what that problem is that we all have? The oligopoly that is the airline industry. Okay? Now, I'm not going to call out any names on these airlines. I just want to make an observation for you about the airlines that you may not have considered, but when you think about it, greatly colors the service that you receive at the airline. Is there any other business that can do you more wrong than an airline can do you without ever having to give you your money back? Think about the worst experience that you had with an airline. Did you get your money back? Think about any other business that would have you go through an experience like your worst experience with the airline. I bet you could get your money back. Or at the very least, a gift card or something for the next time you come around, 20% off or something like that. The airline doesn't give you anything. And they ain't even thinking about giving you anything. And since they ain't even thinking about giving you anything, they don't give a damn about you, all right? So I decided, I grew up in Houston, as some as you know. So I flew to Houston for a couple of days to hang out. And then I left Houston and I was going to Los Angeles. I was flying out on Wednesday. My plane's supposed to land at 2 o'clock. I'm kicking it with my best friend from when I was 7 years old, right? And I'm not going to lie. I got us some tickets to go kick it at the ESPY party. I heard there was an after party LeBron was having. You know, I'm trying to stump for my homeboy, if nothing else, right? Like, oh, we made it, right? It's one of those situations. So I'm trying to take it so we can go all kick it, right? So he flew in earlier than me. He landed. He got everything straight, checked in the hotel, all that. Okay, cool, right? So my plane was supposed to land at 2 o'clock Pacific time. All I'll tell you is that my plane that was supposed to get there at 2 o'clock Pacific time, that plane got canceled. So then I got put on a flight on another airline, and then I got on a connection in Las Vegas to go to L.A., and that plane was delayed about an hour and a half. I'm supposed to get to L.A. at 2 o'clock. I don't get there until 10 o'clock. So I get there at 10 o'clock, and I'm like, all right, well, let me go to Carousel and get my bag. I still got time to get right and make it happen for the night. They said my bag wasn't there. So I go wait in line for an hour to tell them that my bag was not there. And they're like, well, we'll get your bag to you soon as we get your bag. And so the next day comes, 8 o'clock in the morning, my phone rings. I'm like, oh, great, it's the airline. They called just to let me know they hadn't found my bag. They never called me to let me know they had found it. They just called to let me know they hadn't found it. So that's Thursday. So I got to go buy clothes. And I was reminded of this by Allen Iverson because I wasn't going to spend a whole lot of money on clothes. So I'm walking around looking like it's 2000. White T-shirts, cargo shorts, tennis shoes. Taking over for the 99 and the 2000. My luggage did not get to me until Friday night. My flight left Saturday morning. That was like setting thousands of dollars on fire. I'm going to go party in Los Angeles, but I'm not going to go have any clothes. And guess what? The airline ain't going to give me back my money. They brought me my bags. My lotion was all melted. Clearly my things had been rummaged through. And I found out that part of the reason why they couldn't find my bag is that the color they listed of my bag was yellow when my bag is orange. And you're probably wondering, gee, Bomani, why do you have an orange bag? Because it's orange. You know it when it comes off the carousel. I made their jobs easy. But do you think I'm going to get any of my money back? Do you think they considered giving me any of my money back? Do you think they even had sympathy when I got on the plane in Los Angeles flying to Miami and they didn't have any wireless on it? It's 2015. Your plane doesn't have wireless. I should get my money back. Never gotten a dime back from the airline. We got to find some way around this. Can we have some kind of protest where we can march up to your local airport? Because how is it that they can get away with treating you so bad without ever having to give you your money back? I'm just saying. I feel like that's a failure in the marketplace. It is, however, another segment down in this time where we don't have much to talk about.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
The Pacers, I saw on the internet that the Pacers were going to roll out some new jerseys. And it's a picture of George Hill, who, by the way, apparently is rocking a Cisco. Yeah, George Hill decided to go with the blind dye job. I don't know. Anyway, he's there, and he's wearing a red jersey with yellow letters that says Hickory, because the Pacers have rolled out Hickory High School jerseys. That's right. Hickory High School jerseys. Here is the statement from Larry Bird. Our team will be honored to wear the Hickory uniforms because of the attention it will bring to the storied history of Indiana basketball and the success of that movie. Hoosiers takes us all back to a special place and time. Who the hell is us? Like, I'll be the one to say it. Hoosiers is boring. I know I'm not alone in feeling that way. It is a boring movie. I don't understand why people find it to be so inspirational. I really have trouble understanding that one. Like, Gene Hackman, that man couldn't inspire me to do anything. Not the way that he was acting in that movie. Like, really? Everybody always told me what a classic Hoosiers was. I'd never seen Hoosiers. So a few years ago, I went on the Amazon, and I decided not just to rent Hoosiers, not just to find it on the internet. I decided to buy it because I wanted to take my time to come to understand this American phenomenon that is Hoosiers. And I got done, and I was like, what am I doing here? First of all, why is it the 1950s and people are out here on the countryside and we got these synthesizers like the Equalizer just came on? It doesn't make any sense. Play some old school. Then you get into it and you're watching the movie, and I'm just like, what is the appeal of this? Like, what's the hook? What are we doing here? But people absolutely love this movie. So once again, here's what Larry Bird said about it. Our team will be honored to wear the Hickory uniform because of the attention it will bring to the storied history of Indiana basketball and the success of that movie. Larry Bird, I understand that there's some lies that you just have to tell when you get into a position of power. Let me rewrite that statement the way that you want to put it, okay? Our team will be honored to wear the Hickory uniforms because of the attention it will bring. Scratch out. Our team will be honored to wear the Hickory uniforms because of the money it will bring to us. Because people are going to be out there buying those Hickory High School jerseys. Oh, buddy, they are going to be buying those Hickory High School jerseys. In fact, if I were the Pacers, like if the Pacers out here about that money, like, you think the Pacers about that money? Because I think the Pacers about that money. If the Pacers about that money, you know what they need to do? They need to trade for your little man Deli or figure out a way to sign him. They got a little cap space right now. Go out there, get Deli, bring him in, and put them Deli Hickory High jerseys out there on the shelves. He will be the #1 jersey seller in America. And a lot of you guys probably hear me say that are like, come on now, you're going too far. Did you know that Deli had one of the top 15 jerseys in terms of sales in the NBA this year? Yeah, Dellavedova, the dude who plays for the Cavs. Top 15 jersey sales. If they put a Dellavedova Hoosiers jersey in the store, put that right up there next to the Danny Amendola jerseys. Woo-wee! Oh, Danny Woodhead, that's the one I'm thinking about. Sorry, he used to play for the Patriots too. Put them out there and they gonna sell. They gonna move. Like, that is what they need to do. Now, I just got somebody hit me up on Twitter and said, you need to back off. Yes, the movie is boring, but unless you live here, you can't fully understand. That's fine. I don't live in Indiana. Guess what? Neither does anybody else. Don't nobody live in Indiana but you and your friends. Don't nobody else live in Indiana. But guess what? Everybody loves Hoosiers. It's just boring. Now, of course, there's the other level of this to Hoosiers, which is Hoosiers is, let me get the analogy right on this one, right? Hoosiers is to Indiana as Rocky is to Philadelphia. Okay? Yes, the Hoosiers team was based on a real basketball team. Well, I believe the town is Milan, right? Just as Rocky was based on an actual boxer, that being Chuck Wepner. Okay? However, you have real live heroes who actually have like better and more inspiring stories that you choose to ignore. With Philadelphia, that more inspiring story, of course, is the one of Joe Frazier. But in Philadelphia, there is a statue of a fictional character rather than a statue of Joe Frazier. How that makes sense, I'll never understand. But look, if you get a chance, go on the internet and look up, Google Black Hoosiers, and you'll find a short film that was directed by a gentleman named Marquise Daisy. I had the privilege of working with Marquise on a 30 for 30 documentary called Randy University that was about Randy Moss. Marquise directed that. It is an incredible piece of work, and I'm saying it's incredible because of him, absolutely not because of me. But he also directed the Black Hoosiers piece about Oscar Robertson and his teammates at Crispus Attucks High School, which was the first black school in America to win a state championship. And you start getting back and talking about the things that they had to go through. Oscar Robertson and his guys in Indiana and Indianapolis in 1955. You know, where they're out there playing games, where you playing against the team and you're playing against the referees. And for years, the school couldn't even participate in the high school tournament. And then once they did get into the high school tournament, they'd have difficulty on, like, finding locations and places to play because the high schools in Indianapolis, the all-white high schools, would not allow them to come play in their gyms. And they sure as hell weren't coming to the Crispus Attucks gym in large part because it was too small. So then now they're going off the beaten path to have to play in these other towns and everything else. Like, yo, there's your story, all right? Like, there's your underdog story. Now, the argument that people will make about Hoosiers is, the Oscar Robertson team, they had Oscar Robertson. He was good. But, look. I almost said something I shouldn't have, by the way. My bad. Jimmy Chitwood. You sure Oscar Robertson was better than Jimmy Chitwood? When people talk about Jimmy Chitwood, you sure Oscar Robertson was better than Jimmy Chitwood? I'm not sure Oscar Robertson was better than Jimmy Chitwood. Right? Like, that's a square matchup right there. There's only one reason that you think that those dudes are underdogs and that the Oscar Robertson team would not be, because those cats are underdogs in life. I mean, those dudes were playing at a school that was founded at the behest of the Ku Klux Klan, so there would be a place for the black people to go to school where you did not have to be around the white people. Yeah. Like, there's your real live underdog story. I would think that if you want to honor the history of Indiana high school basketball, and I understand that they're the Indiana Pacers, not the Indianapolis Pacers, but if you want to honor high school basketball in the state of Indiana, from what I can tell, there's a strong argument to be made that the most important high school basketball team in Indiana were those Crispus Attucks teams, right? And I feel confident saying this because I talked about this on Around the Horn today with Bob Ryan, who knows more about basketball than anybody. And if I'm on the same side as Bob Ryan, I feel like I'm on the right side of this thing. But I do know those Hoosiers jerseys are going to sell out. Let me tell you something else I know, too. There's going to be some dudes that show up to the court wearing those Hoosiers jerseys. And let me tell you something about the guy that shows up to the court wearing the Hoosiers jersey. The dude that shows up to the court wearing the Hoosiers jersey, he's not doing that because he thinks he's Jimmy Chitwood. Oh, no, no, no. He's doing that either because he thinks he's one of the sorry kids on the team or because his daddy is an alcoholic assistant coach. Right? He's wearing that Hoosiers jersey because he feels as though he is not quite like the good basketball players. So he's going to have to do whatever he's got to do to be a good basketball player. And you know what that means. That's right. The dude that shows up to the court in the Pacers Hickory jerseys, he is going to foul you all day long. He is going to end that game with your blood underneath his fingernails. Why? The worst thing you could do is call foul. That's it. That's it. That's all it's going to be. Oh, I got this guy just told me, why does Bomani have to bring race into every segment? Why Bomani has to bring race into every segment, I'll never know. Have you ever seen Hoosiers? Because I seen the last game in Hoosiers. You seen the last game in Hoosiers. That's part of the appeal of the movie. I'm not the one that made it that way. I'm just telling you what the deal is. I'm just telling you that the movie was boring and the synthesizers didn't make sense as people were riding through the countryside. Yep, told you. People get real mad when you talk about Hoosiers. Like you think their kids are on the team when you talk about Hoosiers.
Bomani.
888-729-3776. Let's talk to Scott in Indiana. Scott, thanks for calling the right time.
Hey, Mr. Jones, how you doing tonight?
Doing all right, man. How are you?
Well, I'm doing good. I want to be the caller that tells you why it's one of the great movies of all time. It's because it was the time when the black African young kids was coming into the basketball, and you had a white school kid and stuff like that, and the colors were dunked and stuff like that.
Whoa,
And
whoa, wait a minute. Did you hit me with a black Africans and a coloreds?
Well, they're playing the ball game right.
Wait a minute. Did you hit me with a black Africans and a coloreds and then come behind it when they played the ball game right?
Yes, sir, I did. I'll probably take my phone call and probably put it on the air because you can't say it.
Sir, seriously. You know in 2015 calling people colored is really inappropriate, right?
Well, what do you want to be called then?
Go ahead and let that dude go. He said the black Africans. 888-729-3776 and talk to Mike in Indiana. Mike, thanks for calling the right time.
Oh, you're going to make me follow that?
I'm sorry. I didn't know it was coming. I didn't know.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, hey, I could have, I lived in Indiana on and off for a number of years now. I thought I was the only person in the world that felt that way about that movie. It is so boring. I can't, and I'll tell you now, as long as we're going to put the trash mouth on Indiana sports movies, add Rudy to the list while we're at it.
It's funny. People who don't like Hoosiers, and Mike, I appreciate the call, also tend not to like Rudy. I ain't gonna lie though, the underdog story doesn't never really appeal to me because I see myself as a winner. I don't relate to this. I don't relate to the appearance of mediocrity. Wow, what an interesting call. 888-729-3776 is the telephone number. Did you guys see today that the federal government, they ceased their prosecution of Barry Bonds? No conviction. Like, Barry Bonds comes out of this 10 years later, and all the money that was spent on it and everything else, boom, there it is, gone. All for nothing. The only thing I think that happened on the back end is, I don't think Barry Bonds could have gotten the Hall of Fame anyway, even without this case being pushed necessarily. But that's it. Nothing came of it. We're just all down on Barry Bonds. Now, look, I understand how much people dislike Barry Bonds. I understand why people dislike Barry Bonds so much, because Barry Bonds went out of his way to be unlikable. If you ever get a chance, check out Jeff Pearlman's biography of Barry Bonds called Love Me, Hate Me. It's a really interesting book, but it also pointed to something that I found to be interesting about Bonds was that Willie Mays was Bonds' godfather, and Mays told Barry that if you are going to be a star, there has to be some distance between you and everybody else. Basically, the star is supposed to be a jerk, was in large part what he was taught. And, of course, he clearly seemed to take this a little bit too far. But I wound up in an interesting conversation on the Internet last week with people about Barry Bonds where, the All-Star game came and they had what they called their four greatest living baseball players. It was done by a fan vote, and I want to say the four were Aaron, Mays, Sandy Koufax, and Johnny Bench. Now, the part on that one that jumped out to me, of course, well, not of course, you might not think about it this way, was Frank Robinson. Like, if you needed a Cincinnati Red to be there, I think that Frank Robinson is the most underrated great baseball player of all time. Frank Robinson and his 586 home runs. Frank Robinson and his Triple Crown. Frank Robinson and his MVP in 2 different leagues. Frank Robinson, the first black manager in baseball. Like, the list of things that I can say about Frank Robinson over and over and over again, and maybe it's because he played between those 2 teams, but we always seem to forget about him. But anyway, I got to talking about Bonds. I was like, well, Bonds is one of the 4 greatest living baseball players. And it wound up getting me into a discussion about Bonds and Ken Griffey Jr. And Barry Bonds, as much as people like Ken Griffey Jr. and as big a star as Ken Griffey Jr. was, Barry Bonds was just a different caliber of baseball player than he was. Like, Ken Griffey Jr. hit more home runs, but past that, Barry Bonds was just a better player flat out. I was floored by how many people responded to me that they thought that Ken Griffey Jr. was a better baseball player all time than Barry Bonds. Like, I could not believe it. And even with understanding how much people hated Barry Bonds, what I didn't realize was you guys seem to have forgotten how good Barry Bonds was before the allegedly the juice. Now, if you go to Perlman's book, and I think Game of Shadows also basically says the same thing, that Barry Bonds' decision to start using performance-enhancing drugs, if it took place, was after the 1998 season. That was the last time. It was after the 1998 season. And statistically, you can kind of look at his numbers, and there's an indicator of that fact. Remember, Bonds only hit 50 home runs the year that he hit 73. In 2000, he hit 49 home runs in 143 games. In 1999, he hit 34 home runs in 102 games. In 98, he hit 37 in 156. Right? So there's your line of demarcation right there. Guess what you have before 1998? One of the greatest careers of all time. Like, every now and then I feel like we all just need to stop and pause and look back, because Zach Greinke has 43 and 2/3 scoreless innings, and we don't care anymore about it, right? Like, that's just what happened with baseball numbers. We don't find ourselves caring about them anymore in that way. But if you're anything like me, or you're in the age range that I'm in, you can still go back and look at old baseball stuff, and you just sit there and you're just absolutely blown away by what Barry Bonds managed to pull off in his career. Like, he'll never make the Hall of Fame. I don't really want to get into the argument about him being in the Hall of Fame. If they don't want Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame, fine. That's what it is. Just rock with me on this one, right? Bonds batted leadoff through the 1989 season. 1990, he gets moved to the heart of the order. He wins the MVP for the first time. Do you realize that he had a 970 OPS in 1990, a 924 OPS in 1991, both of which led the league? He never had another season after that with an OPS under 1,000. Oh, my bad. He had an OPS under 1,000 in 2006, where it was at 999. Literally, 999. Like, you go down the list of these on-base percentages after Bonds moved to the heart of the lineup: 406, 410, 456, 458, 426, 431, 461, 446, 438. Yo, that's before the juice. That is before the juice. Like, it is highly unlikely. Mike Trout, as good as Mike Trout is Mike Trout going to be as good as Barry Bonds? I don't think so. And think about how good that means that Barry Bonds was, if I feel like I'm saying Mike Trout's probably not going to be that good. Think about how good Barry Bonds had to be, where I can say unequivocally that he was a better baseball player than Ken Griffey Jr. Now, when you get to the Barry Bonds on performance-enhancing drugs era, look, if performance-enhancing drugs is what was required for us to get the Barry Bonds that we saw from 2000 through 2004, then that was just a trade that was going to need to be made. Like, that was like watching your own creative player that you built all the way up and you took him down to the easy level of the game. Like, we may never see anything that dominant ever again. And the federal government apparently figured that out. As many people have said throughout the course of the day, pitchers couldn't figure out Bonds, and neither could the feds.
Bomani.
Adrian Peterson just restructured his contract. Yep, just restructured his contract. $20 million guaranteed for him after the restructuring of his contract. It gives the Vikings more cap flexibility or whatever. Okay, cool. Like, there it is. I just want to make note of the fact Adrian Peterson somehow just keeps on winning. Really. He just keeps on winning. So here's the way that the deal goes. Charles Robinson at Yahoo reported this, that Peterson's going to get more guaranteed money for 2015 and 2016, and that the team in 2017 can go ahead and release him, but they have to release him early enough that he would be able to get an early jump on the free agent market, and if he's still good at 33, still wind up being able to go somewhere else. Do you realize how crazy it is that there is any running back that could get a team to still be willing to shell out all this money for him at 30? At 30. Like, Adrian Peterson did not play last year. And the come up that he's going to make off the fact that he did not play last year is that those legs will be a little bit fresher, and that makes it a whole lot easier to get your team to guarantee you some money for the year 2016. The last year of Adrian Peterson, things that don't make sense for 100, Alex. So when the story first broke about Adrian Peterson and child abuse, what Adrian Peterson did was abhorrent. I don't think there's any disputing the fact that it was abhorrent. I did think, though, that it was very interesting that there was a significant level of finger wagging about that, when it seemed pretty clear when you looked at his case that, you weren't just going to find an easy villain. Like, you found an indefensible act, but an easy villain wasn't really there. Like, there are a whole lot of people who got the hell beat out of them when they were kids, and they think that that's what made them what they are, and they in turn beat the hell out of the next set of kids. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm just saying that there's not an easy villain at play there. Like, what happened? Certainly wrong. But Peterson, not quite the easy villain, but we made him into the easy villain. There was a bit of a discussion, I think, on both sides about Peterson because it came into a thing about corporal punishment and whether or not you should ever put your hands on your children. And that allowed people to find sides and find a comfortable medium that allowed for a compelling discussion on both sides. Because in sports media, what we're really looking for, we're kind of setting the betting line most of the time, where we're trying to find a place or a pivot point or a question that allows for arguments on both sides. And, once the word got out that Peterson was damaging the little dude's scrotum with the switch, all of a sudden there weren't two sides. People have a hard time being on the same side as hurting the scrotum. Like, just generally speaking, that's not the side that most people are going to wind up being on. General discussion about corporal punishment. Oh, okay, now we can get people on both sides. We can get on TV. We can hash it out. We can go back and forth. Boom, there it is. But Adrian Peterson had to go all the way away last year. All the way away because the block was too high. It's coming off the Ray Rice thing and everything else. Block was too high. The Radisson didn't want to sponsor the backdrop for those Vikings press conferences, and you couldn't really blame them. All they would do was having press conferences about child abuse and what image were you having hit you over the head. Radisson, 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 Radisson. Like, that's not why they bought that. They didn't spend that money to have their name associated with that. So then that goes down, then Adrian Peterson had to go away. And you remember that last year we heard all this talk about, the Vikings are trying to find a way to get rid of Adrian Peterson. No, they weren't. Not only is Adrian Peterson good, Adrian Peterson is the dude that people will pay money to come see. They are opening a new stadium, in 2016? I think they were set to play 2 years outdoors, then they go back inside? Oh, no. Adrian Peterson's going to be there. And you know who knew Adrian Peterson was going to be there? Adrian Peterson. That's who. So we're almost 1 year away from like a full-bore scandal. We're 1 year away from a discussion that was on the real news, not this fake news we do over here in sports. I'm talking about the real news. It was all over the place. And what happens a year later? Adrian Peterson restructured his contract and coming back with $20 million guaranteed. Hope you guys understand, man. Life isn't really about fair, and your boss's morals only go as far as his bottom line. If Adrian Peterson wasn't that good, they would have put a stamp on him, they would have sent him out of there, and they would have had a real stern statement about the things that they will not tolerate. Instead, the Vikings have spent the better part of the last, 6 months begging for the privilege of giving Adrian Peterson $20 million. Seriously, begging for the privilege of giving him $20 million. That's what happens when you're good at your job and keep it up like you are. That's what you get. Now, I got no problem with it, really. I have no reason to expect that Adrian Peterson won't be good this year. Quite honestly, I don't know when I'm supposed to expect Adrian Peterson not to be good. Like, running backs start falling off the cliff around the point that Adrian Peterson has reached. Like, this is about the time where things start going bad. But, like, the idea of seeing Adrian Peterson start going bad, like, I can't even think of anything that's comparable to that. It's almost like one day LeBron James is going to, like, really start slowing down. But it's very, very difficult for me to conceptualize and put into my mind the idea that I'm going to see it with my own eyes. It just doesn't seem like Adrian Peterson is real. Like, they only made one of those. They made one. And that's the one that we got. And that's what the Vikings are betting on. Like, at last segment, I went through Barry Bonds' stats, and you just wind up being amazed when you see the totality of it. DeMarco Murray is about to go play for the Philadelphia Eagles. And the biggest reason not to bet on DeMarco Murray is that DeMarco Murray had a season last year with over 370 carries. And guys that have had seasons with over 370 carries have never been able to put it back together. They've never run as well as they did that year they had all those carries. Like Eric Dickerson, after he had 370 carries, had a year or two where he was still really strong. But we're talking about Eric Dickerson. You know what makes Adrian Peterson so incredible? Adrian Peterson has a season where he had 1,700 yards and a season where he ran for 2,000 yards. And he didn't have 370 carries in either one of those seasons. In either one. He got to 363 in 2008 when he had the 1,700 yards. So it's fair to ask, like, where exactly the line is. But Peterson has managed to put up these insane numbers without having to carry the ball all that much. I mean, he's carried it a lot. There's no disputing the fact that he's carried the ball a lot. But he hasn't had that 370 carry season. Why? Because when you get as many yards at a time as Adrian Peterson does, you just don't have to do that. It was going to take a lot more than a beat-up kid before the Vikings just put a stamp on this dude and got rid of him. Like the Vikings with Peterson, you know what they did? They did it like Nike would. Like, that's what Nike does in times of all these scandals. Like, look, everything's bad. The block is hot. Totally understand it. If we just chill out and let y'all come down, we can come back and get right back to business. But you don't give away somebody that valuable because they made a mistake. You give them away because you think you can't bring them back. And the Vikings were like, look, here's what we're going to do, man. We're going to act like we can't bring them back for a long time. Like, yeah, that's what we real mad. We real offended. I mean, we are. All right, we really are. Don't get me wrong. Like, we love kids just as much as anybody else. But, yeah, we real mad right now. We real offended. And then everything's going to die down. Everything gonna calm down, and then everybody's gonna be like, man, don't you remember what it was like when AD was out there running for all those yards? Don't you remember that? And that's what it's gonna be. And guess what? When that first game comes back, you think anybody's gonna be booing Adrian Peterson? You think anybody's mad Adrian Peterson got $20 million guaranteed? Nope. That first game back, they're gonna be out there wearing Adrian Peterson jerseys. They're gonna be, yo, welcome back. We tease them a lot because we got them on the spot. Welcome back. And that's just the game. And every time somebody gets hyper-moral in sports about things that happen when people commit transgressions of varying degrees, it's all a function of how much you can provide. And the embarrassment that the Vikings suffered with Adrian Peterson is absolutely worth the yards they think that they're going to get. I will say this, though. Adrian Peterson averaged 6 yards a carry in 2012. He averaged 4.5 in 2013. He might get old just like everybody else, even if I can't imagine it.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt. Frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
All guests join us on the Subway Fresh Take Highline, including our next guest. He writes for Grantland.com, and he knows a whole lot about baseball. His name is Jonah Keri. Jonah, what's going on?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing all right, and it just feels like yesterday David Price just got to Detroit, and now it looks like they're about to put a stamp on him and send him out. Do I have this correct?
Well, that's what Bob Nightingale of USA Today is reporting, and in some ways that makes sense, and in some ways I'm a little surprised by that. There's kind of two schools of thought here. The first one is Price is a free agent at the end of the season. So is Yoenis Cespedes, so is Alex Avila, so is Alfredo Simon, and so is Joakim Soria. So by that logic, okay, well, all these guys are free agents. The Tigers are a 500 team. They don't have Miggy Cabrera. They're not a great shot to make the playoffs. Even if they do, they're not a great shot to win the World Series. Go ahead and cash in these guys because, you know, they're going to be free agents, and it's better to get something in a trade potentially than to get a compensatory draft pick, or in some cases, if it's a guy like Simon, to get absolutely nothing. So, okay, that makes sense. But on the other hand, these guys have pushed their chips so far into the middle of the table. Mike Ilitch is in his mid-80s. You know, these guys have spent so much money. Verlander's overpaid. Cabrera's got that monster contract. They're still paying off part of Prince Fielder's contract, for God's sakes. that maybe it gets to the point that you're too far down the road that even if you trade these guys or whatever, what does that mean? The Tigers are probably going to be bad pretty soon. They're probably going to go turn a little bit Phillies on us because they're kind of an older team and they're not all that good anymore. So what does that mean? If you trade all these guys now, you're kind of rebuilding with a 73-win team instead of a 68-win team? I don't know if that has all that much merit. There's an argument to be made that once you've gone this far down the road, you're sort of at the point of no return. Maybe go the other way and push all in and try to get even more guys and worry about Price and Cespedes and all these guys later.
Well, you kind of dipped your toe into it that there's a real you can't take it with you quality to what the Tigers have done the last couple of years with Mike Ilitch. We've seen this with teams. You saw this with the Lakers when they got Steve Nash in and Dwight Howard in that year. These sorts of things wind up happening with teams. The owner gets old and he wants to see a championship, but then what do you do when that plan didn't work?
I love that Lakers comp, too, because if you look at Kobe, still a very good player at that point in his career when they were doing that, no question. But you could start to see the end for him coming as well, and this became the kind of thing where, it was a combination of where the owner stood and where the players on the roster stood, and just recognizing that you didn't necessarily have much help coming. In other words, the Lakers weren't going to suddenly parlay any number one picks into anybody exciting or whatever. And it's the same with the Tigers. It's not like they have a guy like Chris Bryant or Jock Peterson sitting in the minor leagues waiting to come up. This is it. This is the best that they can do. And the Lakers were probably going to be bad one way or another. Whether or not they got Nash and Howard, Kobe was going to regress. They didn't have much around him, and that was going to be that. And now the Lakers, of course, are bad and they're rebuilding, but they still have Kobe. And really the Nash and Howard stuff, did it make that much of a long-term difference? It's not like it hurt the Lakers that badly. These guys are off the books now, and they're rebuilding. So I kind of feel that way about the Tigers. Nash and Howard obviously worked out terribly, but in some ways, maybe the Tigers do that, and this time it works out potentially a little bit better for them, and they make it happen because one way or another, they are going to be rebuilding. They're going to be forced to do that within the next couple of years regardless. So I just feel like, like you said, once you've got your foot on the gas, just press a little harder and worry about the speeding tickets later.
All right, we're talking to Jonah, Keri of Grantland, but I think there's another interesting angle here, which is of these teams that are pushing for the wild card spot in the American League right now, the Tigers are the only one of those teams that has a negative run differential. They look to be clearly lesser than these other teams to a point where you wonder if the 46 and 46 part is a mirage. But if you have a mirage and you're an executive, how difficult is it to look at people and be like, honestly, we're not as good as we seem? Because people seem to think you should just cross your fingers.
Yeah, that's a great point. Run differential definitely comes up a lot in that respect. There's also a stat called cluster luck. That's luck with an L, and basically what that means is that teams, on average, will scatter hits a certain way when they're pitching and bunch together hits a certain way when they're hitting, and sometimes teams get lucky. So the Twins, for instance, are really not this good, but they've been really lucky by that stat. They're number one in baseball. And so you look at it and, management is trying to decide what to do and ownership is trying to decide what to do. And they might say, well, it doesn't matter. These wins are banked one way or another. So we're not going to be concerned about whether or not we're lucky. More than that, we've got Miguel Sano who came up and he's going to help us. And we've got some other young guys who could contribute. So maybe even though we were lucky, we will be able to either sustain the luck or get better play out of guys and go forward from there. So maybe the Tigers could look at it and say, yeah, we've had a negative run differential, but on the other hand, X, whatever you want to say. Anibal Sanchez has underperformed. Maybe he'll get better, or maybe this will happen, or maybe that'll happen. And I think it goes the other way, too. You look at a team like the Toronto Blue Jays. I mean, gosh, they've had an unbelievable run differential all year long, sitting, in the 80s for much of the year. If just based on that, if they had average luck and an average bullpen, they would have just about the best record in the American League right now. Instead, they're hovering around 500. So, that becomes incumbent upon Alex Anthopoulos to go to his bosses and say, listen, I know they're only a 500 team, but gosh, our fundamental run scoring and run differential and all that stuff suggests that we should be much better than this. Let's go ahead and make a move or two just to goose the process, and hopefully along with the added skill, that luck will come, and maybe we'll make the playoffs for the first time in 22 years.
All right, talking to Jonah, Keri at Grantland.com. We'll switch gears a little bit. Albert Pujols is leading the American League in home runs. Somehow Albert Pujols also has all of 12 doubles. Like, how is it that everything has looked basically the same as it has since he's gotten to the Angels, except all he's doing more of is hitting home runs?
Yeah, I think a little of that is kind of whatever you want to say, luck or random chance or whatever. And that happens a lot. We don't really look at doubles all that much as a stat, and we probably should. Sometimes you'll have a guy who he'll hit 40 doubles and he'll hit 8 home runs. You'll say, well, that's not much of a power hitter. And the next season it'll just flip and it'll be 25 doubles and 30 home runs. You'll say, oh, gee, what happened? And it was just that things started to catch up, and it could be a couple of extra feet on a fly ball, in some cases it's a young player too. We often do that where we project younger players who hit a lot of doubles. Christian Yelich is like kind of a skinny guy and hits a lot of doubles or whatever with the Marlins, but the consensus on him is eventually he might turn into a 20 home run guy because he's got real nice bat speed and he hits a bunch of doubles and line drives. And there are players all over the league where you could say that for. It's not normal that a guy like Trout comes into the league and immediately hits a bunch of home runs. Typically, the whole doubles turning into homer thing is a real thing. Obviously, with Pujols, he's a guy who's in his mid-30s, so it's a little different. But I do think, some of that is a little bit of luck, potentially, and some of that is just Pujols being healthy as well. That is a big factor. I wrote about him extensively a few weeks ago, and I talked to, a real good source in the Angels organization who knows, all this stuff. I mean, he's close to the on-field side and the off-field side and what have you. And he told me that Pujols is healthier than he's been in 2 or 3 years. And it's kind of a double effect. Where number one, Pujols wasn't healthy on the field, so he just wouldn't be able to swing with as much authority. It was specifically his legs and his lower half and his feet that were giving him problems. And number two, when you don't have that lower half and you got plantar fasciitis and bad knees and all that, you can't work out your lower half in the off season, so you can't get stronger or even maintain. So then it becomes this cascading effect. The end of last year was the first time that he felt truly healthy for a long, long time. Goes into the off season, really gets after it in terms of the workout regimen, and now you watch him, and it's that classic Pujols weight transfer where he's really getting his hips and his lower body into every pitch, and he's smashing them. So go ahead and attribute a little bit of it to luck, but I think he's just physically hitting the ball harder, and as a result, hitting the ball further, and some of those doubles are becoming home runs.
Well, why isn't this translating, though, to him getting on base? I mean, this was a guy when he was in St. Louis, and we can't expect him to be that guy anymore, but that's a guy year after year after year, well over 400 in on-base percentage. Now he's at 326.
Yeah, some of that is fewer intentional walks. We're seeing quite a bit of that. I don't have it in front of me, but when I wrote about it a few weeks ago, it was way, way, way down. One of the lowest numbers of his career. He used to get intentionally walked all the freaking time when he was in his prime with the Cardinals. So that's part of it. And I think part of it is this is kind of a Ron Chandler concept. Ron Chandler is this guy wrote about fantasy baseball for 30 years and did so analytically, too. And what he would argue was that older players would often, he called it, opening up their swing, meaning they would just get more aggressive because they felt that they weren't necessarily going to be able to, hit home runs on pitches where they didn't make full contact, where they didn't really lay into it. So they're going to start to really just look for pitches, even if it's early in the count or whatever. If they see a pitch that they can smash, they're not going to kind of be patient and wait it out and see what happens. They feel like they have to go after it because maybe they lost a little bit in bat speed or skill like they had before. So I think it's probably a combination of those two things, certainly with intentional walks. Obviously, you're being intentionally walked less often, you're going to get on base less. And I think part of it is he's just being more aggressive. He's attacking pitches, sometimes early in the count, because he doesn't necessarily want to get to, let's say, a 3-2 count or a 2-2 and know that he has to hit this pitch a mile when, if he's being honest, maybe his reflexes are down 1,000th of a percentage point compared to what it was when he was in his prime.
All right, last question for Jonah, Keri at Grantland.com. How excited are you about going to Cooperstown to see Pedro Martinez inducted into the Hall of Fame?
Oh, my God. Well, my avatar is on Twitter is Pedro Martinez. Pedro Martinez is one of my favorite players of all time. Pedro Martinez also pitched for my favorite team, the Montreal Expos, who, of course, haven't existed for 11 years. And we really don't get an opportunity to celebrate the team. You're a Braves fan, Bo. If the Braves are good or bad, at least you can go to the stadium and watch them, and they exist. You can see highlights on SportsCenter or what have you. I just don't have any of that. And so any opportunity for nostalgia, we go out of our minds. And, Pedro's going to give a great speech, of course. And the really neat part here is that he belongs to everybody. He was an Expo, of course. Obviously a Boston Red Sox, and he'll go in as a Red Sox, and deservedly so. He was the best pitcher in the world in his prime in the late 90s and early aughts with the Red Sox. But Mets fans can claim him, and Phillies fans can claim him. And really, if you think about Pedro, kind of the legend, and how good he was, and what kind of a character he was, and the way that he talks, and how frank he is, and how likable he is, he really belongs to all of baseball. You could be a Kansas City Royals fan or a Minnesota Twins fan, and you just like Pedro Martinez. He's just not only one of the best pitchers of all time, but truly one of the most embraceable. So it's going to be a great, great crowd. It's also Randy Johnson, John Smoltz, and Craig Biggio going in. So it's going to be probably one of the biggest crowds in the history of Cooperstown. I was there for Cal Ripken and Tony Gwynn a few years ago. That drew 90,000. That was the biggest one ever. I have a feeling this is going to rival that. It's going to be really nuts up there. It's a lot of fun to go for the weekend. And, if you're kind of thinking about it, if you're on the fence, if you live in the Northeast or whatever, highly, highly recommend the trip. And not only that, I'll go you one more. Saturday, show up on Main Street at a place called the Book Nook between noon and 2. I'll sign books and kibbutz with you. How about that? A package deal.
There we go. And somebody at the Hall of Fame job better be to keep Pedro's Jerry curl on his bust nice and moist. Every time when I come to the Hall of Fame, if that Jerry curl is not dripping, I'm going to feel like they went short on us, man. Jonah, Keri, Grantland.com. But, man, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bomani.
We are now moving into the fun season where college football coaches start doing all their interviews in advance of the season, which is always fun because college football coaches tend to be a little bit more fun because they have their demographic that they have to please who like things that are more fun. We did on Highly Questionable, as you could probably tell by the fact that we're often wearing different clothes in our interviews. We tape interviews as we can get them. So when the coaches come to Bristol, today we record as many as we can. So today we recorded 3 of them. We did one with Dan Mullen. We did one with Steve Spurrier that ran today, which was as entertaining as you might imagine it would be. And the third one was with Brett Bielema. Now, Brett Bielema coaches at Arkansas now. For those of you who don't know, I grew up in Houston. If I were a rooting man, in fact, I'm not a rooting man about much. I still root for Texas football. Right? Like, I still root for Texas football. That's a thing. So I decided I would joke with Brett Bielema a little bit. You know, Brett Bielema said it felt, I believe the word he used was erotic when Arkansas beat Texas in the bowl game, and they beat the brakes off of Texas, too. Now, this is an interesting rivalry because if this is like 1969, it's a full-on rivalry, right? But you fast forward to the 21st century, and it is a historical rivalry, but it's one of those rivalries where one side cares a lot more about it than the other. And the Arkansas folks really, really, really care about beating Texas. They really, really care. Like, I'm not making any judgments of them as a result of that. I'm just telling you, they really, really care about beating Texas. So when Brett Bielema said it felt erotic to beat Texas, I laughed because, A, I believed it, and B, I can only imagine how many people in the state of Arkansas agreed with him when he said that it was erotic. So I joked with him a little bit. I was like, yeah, man, as a native Texan, I had to laugh at you talking about that being erotic. Dude, the smile went off his face. Like, whoop, gone. Boop. Like it never happened. One thing I find very interesting about college sports is all these coaches, look, these coaches go to the job that they go to because they want to check. Right? They want to check. But once you get there, the rivalries are in place, and the people really, really want you to care. So I lived in North Carolina for 10 years before I moved to Miami, and one of the most fascinating things to watch was Butch Davis got to UNC the same year that Tom O'Brien got to NC State. And one huge difference between the two of them was Tom O'Brien was at NC State, and he understood the most important thing that he could do at his job was to beat North Carolina. He treated it like a big deal. They treated it like the game that could save his job. And you can make an argument that it might have in a lot of ways because he ran off that run of beating North Carolina. Like, that was a thing. That if you were going to coach NC State, you needed to care about beating North Carolina more than you cared about anything else in this world. That's what it had to be. Butch Davis never quite grasped that if you were going to coach football at North Carolina, you better stop losing to NC State every year. And he lost to NC State every year. And he would just say, we prepare for this like it's another game, and he never got it. So I like seeing like how coaches acclimate themselves to the rivalries that they have. Because Brett Bielema never cared about playing Texas until he got to Arkansas. He sure showed that he cared real fast. It is a pretty incredible skill that you have to have as a college football coach to get in tune with the hatred of your fan base and then channel that hatred yourself. That's how it goes. Like, I wonder how it works for those guys who wind up at schools that are like, they're rival schools. Like Will Muschamp, for example. Will Muschamp is a Georgia grad. Will Muschamp coached at Florida. I always laugh at the Florida fans who refer to Will Muschamp as, quote, the sleeper cell, unquote. Because they basically feel that the failures of Will Muschamp at Florida are what you would expect if you put a Georgia dude in charge. But now Will Muschamp is the defensive coordinator at Auburn. He's worked at Auburn before. Georgia's got 3 rivals. Auburn, Georgia Tech, and Florida. Like, how do you do this? Especially if you're a dude that's as intense as Will Muschamp, because I imagine it's difficult for Will Muschamp to fake it. Like I say, part of making those millions of dollars if you're going to be a college football coach, learning how to hate the people that your fans also hate, even if they haven't actually done anything to you.
Right Time with Bomani Jones. Weeknights from 9 to 11 Eastern or on demand at ESPNradio.com.